May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Young Jacob, in today's reading from Genesis, was a self-made man. If by self-made you mean he cheated his brother out of his birthright and his blessing, and is now herring off to another part of the country to scout out prospects for marriage, he's not one to look to God for guidance. So he goes to sleep in this nondescript area of the desert, chooses a rock that looks like he could use it for a pillow, and goes to sleep, and encounters God in a way that was very different than what he was used to. So Jacob came to a certain place and stayed there for the night, taking one of the stones of the place. He put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, "You know that I'm with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Then Jacob woke up from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't even know it." How many times has the Lord been in places where we thought he couldn't possibly be? The places where we didn't see God, so of course God couldn't be there. Places that we thought were as far from God as places we'd ever seen. Well, I seemed to come across God everywhere when I was little, when I was growing up. I saw God in the woods, by the sea, in my pets, in the fierce protective love I had for my sister and my brother. Even in those waves of, unrequited love that you get when you're a teenager and you're all in that angsty period, still there was something glorious there, something of God in those loves that never came to be. I'm sure you remember, yeah? But have you ever encountered God in a place that really startled you? Well, I'm sure many of you know that I am not fond of cities. I've spent the last 25 years in cities, and that's because we had to work there. But I am not overly fond of the places. I've lived in New York City, Chicago, Phoenix, Sarasota, Little Rock. I'm so jaded with cities that I don't expect to find a friendly face there, much less find God's face there in many of the people that I encounter. So with so much noise, pollution, chaos, horns, yelling, God is harder to discern there. I was 22 when I went to live in New York City. Now, you have to remember, my hometown of Topsham had one light at the time when I moved to New York City. And it was so safe. How safe was it? It was so safe that when I was 4, I walked from my home in Topsham to downtown Brunswick, where Bowdoin College is, with my best friend, who was also 4. Now, I'm sure my mother was furious by my 4-year-old trek to downtown Brunswick, but it was safe. It really was. But at 22, a trek to New York City held no familiar landmarks, no stars to steer by. I spent a few weeks recognizing that sleeping by darkness was evidently a thing of the past, and tall buildings could suddenly become wind tunnels if the wind was just right and you were walking down them. It was incredible. And the noise of the city never, ever lets up. There's always noise. And one day, while I was looking for a particularly obscure audition address downtown, I happened onto Wall Street. Now, all I'd seen of Wall Street were images in television and movies of people screaming and waving tickets on the floor of the stock exchange. So, to me, that's what Wall Street was all about. This Wall Street that I landed on, however, contained narrow, winding streets, like the kind you see in Europe, with it's just really tight, and the roads were paved with cobblestones, Just like you remember from those European cities, it was astonishing. The traffic noise didn't penetrate fully into these tight little streets because not many cars could actually navigate them very well. They were so narrow. And everything was quiet. Kind of like a church cloister. Just really, really quiet. And I walked slowly down the street with tears in my eyes and felt calmer than I had in months. God was there. I could feel God's presence beside me as I walked down that street, and I could hear God say, I am here with you, even when things seem too big and too dangerous and too noisy. I'm here. Now, sometimes our ideas about where we will brush against God are set in stone in our heads, kind of like Jacob's stone pillow. He went to sleep convinced that God would be where God was supposed to be, and was awakened by a dream of God that allowed his eyes and his heart to discover, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't even know it. I've never forgotten Wall Street, my Wall Street. All I have to do is close my eyes wherever I am, and I'm right back there on those narrow cobblestone streets. I believe these God places are all around us, if only we have eyes to see them and not a stone for a pillow. I gave up acting when I went to seminary when I was 29. I'd met and married a person who became ordained to the priesthood, and we later had a daughter. She joined us in all of the various churches that we were in around the country, and I expected to find God in the church. I mean, don't you? I expected to, and I often did. I was too busy to look in very many other places for God. The church can keep a person kind of occupied. I ran altar guilds and directed choirs and taught Christian education and developed curriculum and cleaned up, patched up, and shored up various peoples and places. And I saw the front of the church from every single seat in the congregational nave of every church I was in. I caught glimpses of God or melodies of God there. I saw glory and peonies that bloomed at the front of the churches. Then, at the advanced age of 50, I went back on the stage. I know, incredible, isn't it? But it was an interesting theater company. It was an LDS, Latter-day Saints, Mormon theater company. And I'd never worked with so many Mormons in my life. It was interesting. We were committed to the show that we were doing, and I made lots of Mormon friends. I answered lots of questions about my experience of God in my church, and they, in turn, answered my questions about their experiences of God. It was interesting. And each night, we would put aside our differences and tell a tale of love and betrayal on the stage. I'd forgotten the electricity that happens between performers and an audience. It's really how everything becomes fused during storytelling in a setting like that. One night, my daughter came. She was in high school at the time. And she said, it was surreal to see me on stage. You seem to belong there, she said. I mean, she looked really puzzled, like she never expected to see me in this unfamiliar of a place, doing something that she loved, but also clearly that I loved doing. She was just flabbergasted. And me, I never expected to be so overjoyed that she was seeing more of the real me. You know what I mean? Not just seeing Mom, the taxi driver, the counselor, but a part of me that she rarely got to see, and that was exciting. Now, don't get me wrong. I love being mom and taxi driver and counselor. Really, I do. I wouldn't give them up for the world. But for someone to encounter a suddenly bigger version of me in a different place made me laugh with delight. I wonder if the same thing happens with God. I wonder if God is joyful when we see or experience something about him that's unexpected. Some of our ideas of God may be set in stone, but what happens when we experience something that awakens us to a view of God that's bigger and more bewildering than we had ever imagined it would be? I wonder if God is delighted when that happens. Not that God doesn't appreciate being as a father to us any more than I don't appreciate being Zoe's mom, though that's hardly the entirety of me. See, though I am mom but more, God is father but more to the extreme. But how exciting it must be for God when we experience different facets of him. See God in unexpected places. Feel God doing unexpected things. I bet it's surreal. So surreal that it makes us say, God is in this place too. Who'd have thought it? And God is pleased. Amen.